The Sun, Lord of Mysteries Fanfiction Chapter 121 to 130. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 121, Blood Throne. Underground, Backland. Alitza Tudor stood in front of a stone door, his right hand pressing against a symbol engraved on it. It triggered a mechanism. The gears rustled and cracked as the door opened, a steamer of light erupting from within and illuminating the dark passage. Alitza entered, his face solemn. A large, spacious hall with colossal pillars stood before him. There was a platform in the center with 3 thrones, as well as another high throne at the far end of the hall. "At long last, you've arrived," Antigonus exclaimed, relief washing over him. "We can't wait any longer." He approached Alitza. "What made you agree to his suggestion? You should know better than anyone that Backland is the domain of the eternal blazing sun and evernight goddess." Alitza scowled, his brow furrowed. "I know what I'm doing, Antigonus. Don't ever question my decisions again." Antigonus rubbed the back of his head as he pursued his lips. "Then let us go, Your Majesty." He purposefully emphasized, "Your Majesty." Alitza snorted, but he was in no mood to argue with the wolf. He motioned to Antigonus, and they started walking towards the platform in the middle of the hall from the entrance. Their heavy footsteps echoed, drawing the attention of Aemon, who was suppressing the Medici, Sauron, and Einhorn on their thrones. "Do you know something interesting, Alitza?" Aemon asked, turning back to them after strengthening his suppression on the 3 conquerors. He continued, adjusting his monocle. "Trier is also known as the City of the Sun." He approached Alitza, pressing his hand on his shoulders and looking at him in the eyes. "Even the divine kingdom of the eternal sun is close by." "I know," Alitza said indifferently, removing the hand from his shoulders. "But there's nothing we can do about it. The influence of the sun god is so deep-rooted in the continent that even other gods cannot completely shake it. However, I still require a city to serve as the foundation for my new empire. Trier is the ideal location. I already controlled the Sauron family, who ruled over that province. It'll make the transition much easier." Aemon smiled as he clasped his hands behind his back. "That's great and all, but have you forgotten about something, such as Eternal Sun's Aprov?" Alitza cut in, his eyes narrowing in rage. "Enough, Aemon, you should be the most forthright about it." Aemon said, "I was just making sure you were fully aware of your actions so you wouldn't come to regret them later." Alitza gave Aemon a cold stare. Antigonus, who had been quietly listening in, finally spoke up and interrupted them at the right time. Adam has stopped praying. They all turned to face Adam, who had finally opened his eyes and stood up from his prayer position. His bright eyes looked at Alitza. "Let us get started. We don't have much time left. The gods have all turned their attention to Backland." Alitza nodded solemnly as he walked towards the platform that connected the conquerors with others. Adam said as he gazed at the sleeping conquerors. "Ads by PubFuture. You must kill them with your own hands, Alitza. Allow their blood to bathe your hands, and then claim their crowns as your own." Alitza took a deep breath as he listened. He could guess the significance of steps mentioned by Adam. He needed to conquer their crimson crowns. "Wake them up," Adam said softly, looking at Aemon. Aemon nodded before adjusting his monocle. A burst of darkness erupted from the figure of conquerors before retracting back to his monocle. The conquerors awoke, and their bright eyes filled with rage, looked down at their captors. They tried to break free, but the chains that bound them only tightened with their struggle. Sauron yelled, peering down at Alitza. "Alitza, I was right about you from the start. You're a lunatic who doesn't know when to stop." Einhorn spat angrily. "Do you believe you have won? No, it's only the beginning. Even if you kill all of us, our spiritual imprint will follow you for the rest of your miserable life, torturing and tormenting you into the abyss of madness." Medici remained unusually quiet. He didn't even bother looking at Alitza. His emotional gaze was fixed on Adam, however. "Here." Adam pulled out a blood-red sword and handed it to Alitza. "Alitza Tudor, kill them. Take what was theirs and make it yours. Their possessions, families, and thrones. Conquer it all. It is the only path where you can ascend the Blood Throne." Aemon watched the Alitza Tudor with interest, while Antigonus stood silently beside him. Alitza stepped onto the platform, sword in hand. He came to a halt in front of their thrones. He looked into their angry and mad eyes. "This is my victory." His solemn voice echoed across the hall, bringing silence with it. Einhorn and Sauron looked at him with wide eyes, while Medici finally paid attention to Alitza. The silence was broken immediately, as Einhorn and Sauron yelled madly at Alitza, rattling the chains and platform. Alitza ignored the curses and walked towards Einhorn. "You will pay, Alitza tutor." Einhorn stated that despite slowing falling into the embrace of death, his eyes showed no fear. "You will pay for everything." Alitza stabbed Einhorn in the chest, interrupting him. The scorching blood stained the sword, hand, and throne. "This is my victory." He said this while twisting the handle of the sword. A crimson flame erupted from the stabbed heart, consuming Einhorn and burning him to ashes in an instant, leaving only a crimson crown behind. Alitza ignored the seething pain and proceeded to the next conqueror. "You are the devil consumed by greed." Sauron spat, grinning madly. "It'll be the end of you." "This is my victory." Alitza ignored him. He then repeated the action with Sauron, who also burned away into ashes. The scorching red blood filled the platform, as the air grew thick and eerie by moment. The thrones themselves melted down. Alitza finally approached the War Angel, his blood-dyed hand trembling ever so slightly. Ads by PubFuture. Medici looked at him indifferently. "Do you believe you can break the shackles of fate by doing this? You are truly an ignorant one," he chuckled. "This is my victory." Alitza closed his eyes and stabbed the War Angel in the chest, disregarding his words. Medici was consumed by crimson flames. "I'm waiting for you in the underworld, Alitza tutor." He turned to face Adam, who nodded gently. Then he closed his eyes without a struggle, his body burning away into ashes, leaving behind a crown and a sword. Adam entered the platform and waved his hand at the scorched thrones. 3 crimson crowns and a blood sword floated down from the thrones and gathered around Adam. They began to merge under his authority, eventually transforming into a scarlet potion. "Drink it while ascending to the throne," Adam said softly as he handed Alitza the potion. "The throne of blood." Alitza silently examined the potion in his hand before beginning to walk to the high throne at the far end of the hall. He arrived at the throne's steps. His grip on the potion tightened. "No-vel-b-jn.c ohm." He finally looked up at the throne, his eyes flashing with madness and determination. Alitza then drank the entire scarlet potion and began ascending to the throne. Boom! A crimson blaze erupted, devouring and burning him. The steps, throne, and hall underwent a violent change, as blood began to pour out of them, dyeing them crimson. The hall was filled with blood, scorching blood. Screams of the fallen echoed from the boiling red river, emitting a terrifying and disastrous aura. The entire underground palace rattled to its foundations as the colossal pillars melted and cracked. The crimson flames swirled around Alitza with a mighty roar, his heavy footsteps still reverberating across the hall. Alitza's figure was slowly crumbling into fragments, some of which fell onto bloody stairs or the rising red river. He didn't seem to stop. He steadily ascended to the high throne, losing parts of himself along the way. He appeared to be aware of it as well, but he didn't stop or couldn't stop because this was the only path of hope. No matter the price or cost, he will ascend to the blood throne. He will. Ads by PubFuture. Alitza took the final step and stood before the blood throne, his figure nearly completely scorched and devoid of any of his previous noble or youthful semblance. Image here. The crimson flames raged around him, still attempting to consume him. He, on the other hand, raised his hand and snapped. His will spread from his body and infiltrated the flames. The crimson flames froze before swirling and covering his body, then forming a crimson crown above his head. He conquered it. The swirling flames reformed him, pulling him out of death's embrace. It was the epitome of nirvana. Alitza turned to face the hall and stood directly in front of the throne. His eyes remained closed. His head was adorned with a crimson crown. He sat on the blood throne, his aura cataclysmic. Then he opened his eyes, his deep black eyes filled with insanity and madness, hailing the birth of Red Priest. Image here. Alitza looked up, muttering with a twisted smile. Aucases, Ammonizes, Leodoro, Harabergen, Ombella, Bodil. His voice rumbled across the bloody hall, roaring loudly. With his declaration, the sky began to glow crimson. A dreary and disastrous streak of red fire spread across the horizon, widened and brightened, and obstructed the eternal sun. Backland was once again exposed to the divine gazes of the gods. However, the gods did not hide their gazes this time, causing the entire Backland to shake under the divine aura of gods. But, before anything drastic could occur, something rushed out. It simply snuffed out the cataclysmic fire brought by the ascension of Red Priest. The change began as the crimson flames faded from the sky, pierced by a burst of golden light erupting from Backland. It widened and brightened, emitting a majestic divine aura. Crack! A crack was heard all over the world. It rang directly into the ears of everyone, from all-powerful gods to frail mortals. Hum! The golden light that illuminated the sky converged above the place of eternity, morphing into a golden contract with the signatures of 6 gods. It is the alliance contract formed by the 6 gods under the authority of the eternal blazing sun. The entire United Empire began to tremble under the mighty aura of contract before collapsing like a fragile sand castle hit by a powerful wave. Crack! Crack! The cracking thundered across the world as the golden contract began to crumble into void with ascension of Alitsa and the collapse of the United Empire. Boom! The cracked contract finally exploded in a burst of golden light that illuminated the world before concentrating on the figures of 6 gods. The shackles of restraint that had bound the gods for a century crumbled, heralding the era of chaos. Chapter 122, Immemorial Concept. Backland, Northern Continent. The golden contract crumbled into the void, liberating the gods. Then everything fell silent, unusually silent. It was as if the very concept of sound had been stripped from reality, silencing it all. A sense of peace filled the air, enveloping the angels. However, this did not bring them tranquility, but rather a sense of dread. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed their hearts, making their breathing heavy by the second. They could feel it, they could clearly sense what was about to be unleashed on their world. It was chaos. The chains were cracking. They can hear it ever so clearly. The crawling beast of chaos was waking up, free of the golden chains that had bound it for a century. It has returned, only to soak the lands in between with blood and fire. Roar! A mighty roar thundering from the horizon shattered the silence, sending a shockwave that shattered all glasses and ruptured the eardrums of citizens across Backland. Dark and vengeful cloud formations began to imprint their mark on the clear blue sky, dyeing it black from beyond the horizon. As the blue sky was engulfed by a dark and dense path of clouds, strong gusts of wind were unleashed upon the City of Hope. The air became thick and heavy, as if attempting to suffocate the entire city. Boom! A flash of white lightning shattered the dark and ominous sky, symbolizing the wrath of the Lord of Storms. The lightning bolt whizzed towards the betrayer on the blood throne, carrying with it the mighty power to destroy the entire world. Rumble! The City of Hope began to shake violently as cracks emerged and land began to bulge in the center of Backland. Boom! A pillar of crimson flames erupted from the ground, sending a wave that shattered the faces of most buildings in Backland, where so many people didn't know what hit them before the debris from the structures around them eviscerated their flesh and bones. The crimson fire and silver lightning headed for each other, emanating a terrifying aura that began to shake the entire continent. Enough, Leodoro! A mighty voice rang out as a dazzling beam of light pierced through the dark clouds, driving a fraction of the stormy heavens away. Ads by PubFuture. The eternal sun surfaced from the darkness of the horizon. It lit up the dark sky and splattered a palette of gold on the surging, stormy clouds. The rays of light cast a colossal column of light throughout the silver lightning and crimson fire, melting and purifying them in a golden ocean of light. Boom! Boom! The illuminated clouds deepened and surged, unrelenting to his words. Gargantuan lightning blots filled the sky, streaming towards the eternal sun in the high heavens, breaking the beam of light in its path. But, just then, an illusory and massive green tree rose up from the place of eternity and extended into the stormy sky, as though it had encompassed the storm within itself. Wither! A soft voice echoed, causing the world tree to wither and fall, dragging the storm down with it. Roar! A tyrannical aura erupted from an island near the northern continent, signifying the rage of God of the sky. This isn't the time, Leodoro! A serene voice suddenly rang out, bringing the peace of the night with it. It dispelled the tyrannical aura while concreting on a stormy island near the northern continent. The raging island went quiet and serene as deep and thick darkness descended and shrouded it. The peace finally returned. The eternal sun shone a beam of light down into the ruins of Backland, illuminating the figure seated on the blood throne. I, eternal blazing sun, invoke the authority of God to revoke your status as king of the United Empire, Alitsa Tutor, on the charge of betrayal and blasphemy of the 6 gods. The divine voice of the eternal blazing sun thundered across the world, echoing deep into the souls of all, regardless of their differences. Alitsa Tutor rose from the blood thorn, his mad eyes fixed on the eternal sun. He sneered. We'll meet soon, Occuses. The eternal sun remained unchanged after hearing his proclamation. Alitsa stopped bothering the sun as he noticed an illusory white tower and a twilight kingdom forming near the sun. Their divine auras united and pressed down on his shoulders. Alitsa snorted, then nodded solemnly to Adam. Then, the divine gazes of gods all converged on the angel of imagination. November LBJNN. Adam bowed slightly in all directions after calmly looking up from the ruined hall. The figures of Adam, Alitsa, Aemon, and Antigonus faded away from the ruined hall, bringing the bloody event to a close. Ads by PubFuture. Occuses and Lilith stood on a balcony in the Palace of Eternity, looking down at the City of Hope. Backland was in shambles. Almost 2/3 of the city had been razed to the ground. Cries of anguish filled the capital, as blood and fire smeared the ruins. Is this all part of your grand plan, Occuses? Lilith demanded angrily. You allowed Alitsa Tutor to become a god just to break the contract. It wasn't entirely me, Occuses corrected her. Adam played the major part. I simply concealed it. Lilith approached him, her anger growing stronger as she heard his casual words. How can you still be so carefree? Most gods already turned their backs on you. The War of the Pillars is about to begin. And you've just added another hostile god to the mix. What on earth are you thinking? I will triumph. Occuses hugged her and whispered in her ears. I will win, as I always do. His voice soothed her heart. Lilith walked out of his embrace, her eyes wide with emotion. Don't die on me, Occuses. She finally breathed out. Occuses sighed, flicking her brow. I won't, silly. And how can death get her hands on me when you, the embodiment of life, have my back? Lilith chuckled, lightly caressing her brow, her racing heart calmed. I am saying it again. She said, you really have a way with words. Occuses laughed, grabbing her hips and pulling her close to him. The warm and ambiguous atmosphere was suddenly broken by a cough as Trunsoest entered. His face appeared haggard, and his eyes had become dim. Your Excellencies. He bowed, ignoring the ambiguity in the air. I have the report. Occuses and Lilith separated from each other's embrace. They walked over to Trunsoest and took the report on the Backland disaster, peering at it together. How many people died? Occuses inquired, looking up at Trunsoest. 12,225,672. Trunsoest responded, his head still bowed. Lilith frowned. This is Backland, the Empire's capital. At the very least, give it some thought before making such a decision. Well, Occuses nodded, pulling a pitch-black crown from his divine kingdom. I was going to reverse it anyway. I didn't expect others to recover their power from the Golden Order so quickly. It appears that they were really afraid of that prospect, huh? He chuckled. The 6-god contract became null and void. The 4 gods took away their authority from Golden Order with it, causing it to lose 2/3 of its power. The influence of the Golden Order also loosened across the Empire, while some parts even became devoid of order. Ads by PubFuture. Backland was the end result of everything. If the Golden Order was still intact, it would have acted to prevent the destruction from affecting the Backland. Alas. Are you really doing it? Lilith asked, leaning on him. Yes, I'm doing it, Occuses nodded. This was never supposed to happen. I can somewhat control uniqueness of Black Emperor, due to my authority of order. After all, polar opposites attract one another. Trunsoest jerked up, his eyes wide at the black crown. Occuses wore the black crown, and his bright golden iris darkened. He eventually raised his hand and pointed to the destroyed city. With his action, a ripple erupted from the crown, scattering across the ephemeral river of time and gradually shrouding it. Rewind, Occuses declared, twisting his hand. The ethereal river of time froze as the authority of disorder shrouded it, distorting the direction of flow backwards. A miracle dawned. The City of Hope rose from the ruins once again. The pollution and remnant power of gods faded away from the reality. The dead rose as their souls were drawn back from the divine kingdoms of gods, returning to life with no recollection of their previous experiences. The eternal sun in the sky cast a piercing beam of light over Backland, illuminating every nook and cranny of the city. The air became vibrant and pristine. It all went backwards, back to before the calamity. It was a true miracle. Occuses' hand dropped as the flow of time returned to normal. The City of Hope regained its magnificence and splendor. That hurt, he murmured, wiping away the trail of golden blood from the corner of his mouth. Time should be the most immemorial concept in the universe. Are you okay? Lilith inquired, holding his shoulders and supporting him. I'm fine. Occuses nodded weakly, looking over her shoulder at Trunsoest, who was frozen in shock. Come to my divine kingdom. Your apotheosis ritual should begin as soon as possible. Trunsoest nodded quickly, still reeling from the miracle. Let's go, Akasis said, looking at Lilith. I'm going to be very busy in the coming days. Alitsa intends to make Trier his capital. Their figures were bathed in light as they started teleporting away from the City of Hope. And you are allowing him? Lilith inquired, her eyebrows raised, but Akasis merely chuckled. They vanished from the Palace of Eternity in a flash of light. Chapter 123, Trier. On July 29, 1110, the United Empire fell apart with the betrayal of Alitsa Tudor, one of the Dual Kings. On July 30, 1110, the Beast of Chaos was unleashed on the lands in between, causing social order to come crashing down. Except for major metropolitan cities, the territories of Empire have decentralized into anarchy. On July 31, 1110, the angels' families of Ammon, Abraham, Antigonus, Jacob, and Tamara betrayed the seven gods and swore allegiance to Alitsa Tudor, who now goes by the honorific name of Blood Emperor. On August 1, 1110, chaos became the ladder for the ambitious and treacherous angels. 7 new nations emerged almost overnight, declaring sovereignty over parts of the northern continent. With their declaration, the red gates of hell opened on the continent, and war and death engulfed the lands in between. On August 2, 1110, Trunsoest, the Lord of Order, dispatched his royal legion of 10 angels to quell the chaos and subjugate the insurgent nations. At 2 p.m., however, a historic declaration was made in Backland Square, which swept the continent like wildfire, causing many to shiver to their bones, terrified of the coming dark era. The churches of the Lord of Storms, God of Knowledge, and God of Steam announced their unprecedented alliance to the world, shattering the churches' long silence in a terrifying way. They then declared all-out war on the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun. The entire power of the churches was mobilized and marched towards Trier, located in the westernmost part of the northern continent. An unprecedented army of over 80,000 Beyonders marched across the continent, trembling it and striking fear into the even hearts of the bravest. In response, the churches of the Eternal Blazing Sun and the Earth Mother also declared war, mobilizing all of their troops and entering the war. In about a week, the armies of both alliances are expected to clash in Clyde Valley between the Hornassus Mountains, blasting off a symphony of calamity. The light of stars adorned the dark heavens, illuminating the world with a silvery glow. The divine mountains, the Andal Mountains, graced the residence of Eternal Blazing Sun. The Golden Mountains stood tall, visible from the farthest cities on the continent. Ads by PubFuture. A luminescent door floated above the highest peak, emitting a divine and sacred aura. Suddenly, a star in the sky shone brightly before descending from the dark heavens, leaving a trail of silvery light. It landed and exploded into starry blue light on the highest peak of the divine mountains, right in front of the golden door. The starry blue light converged and morphed into an illusory starlight door with images of swirling galaxies on it. Creak. The door swung open, a bloodthirsty aura erupting from within and engulfing the entire Andal Mountain. It almost materialized, collaging the very fabric of reality with a thick mass of blood. Alitsa Tudor emerged from the twisting starlight door, dressed in red royal robes. His long red hair swayed in the hot breezes, and his iron-black eyes were filled with insanity as he stopped and looked at the floating luminescent door. He walked forward, each step trembling the mountain to its foundation. As he approached the colossal door of light, his crimson crown gleamed with an illusory light. "I demand an audience with you, Akasis." Alitsa spoke, his deep and dark voice reverberating through reality, twisting it to his will. The illusory golden door emitted a bright beam of light that illuminated the Andal Mountains, making them appear as bright as day. It cleansed the bloody aura before cascading down to Alitsa Tudor. Akasis emerged from within the beam of light, dressed in his usual black and white attire, his indifferent eyes staring at the intruder. "You didn't just break through the door." Akasis smiled as he approached the Blood Emperor. "I can't say I'm not disappointed. I am no fool to fall for your pretenses." Alitsa sneered, his eyes narrowing at the sun god. "Well," Akasis chuckled, his brows raised. "It appears that the betrayer hasn't completely gone insane. Madness is subjective." Alitsa smiled, his black eyes shining with madness. "Especially when it comes to divine. You should know more about this than I do, Akasis." "Indeed." Akasis nodded, his indifferent eyes glinting. However, he continued with a shrug. "So, I'm here. Speak, Alitsa." Ads by PubFuture. "I seek sovereignty over the province of Trier." Alitsa states his demand unequivocally. "What made you think I'd agree to that?" Akasis spoke in a low and dangerous tone. You are being surrounded. From all sides, Alitsa replied patiently. You're going to lose the war. It didn't matter if Umbella sent her entire church's aid. The alliance of 3 churches, with secret assistance from Ammonizes, will demolish your troops and pierce right into Trier, City of the Sun. This will undoubtedly shake your anchors. They will see to it that it happens. Then, in your weakened and battered state, the war of gods will begin, and you may face 2 or even 3 gods at once. I don't think I need to elaborate on the end result of that. He continued with a twisted smile after noticing the silence of the sun god. But it doesn't have to be that way. In exchange for Trier's sovereignty, I will allow the angel families under my command to fight alongside your church. In this way, not even other gods can point this out because I am only sending troops to defend my land. And your faith in my new empire will not diminish. It's not like I can shake it anyway. He laughed, his eyes dangerously glinting. So, what do you think, Akasis? Alitsa finally asked, his handle reaching for the hand of his red sword. Fine. Akasis nodded simply, his eyes indifferent. What? Alitsa inquired again, his eyes widening slightly. It was as if he didn't expect the sun god to agree so easily. It's fine. Akasis elaborated patiently. Your terms are acceptable. You can rule over all of Trier. He smiled. As for my church, like you said, you can't shake it anyway. Alitsa stepped forward, volcanic rage coursing through his veins. Don't look at me like that, Akasis. Like what? Akasis chuckled, cocking his head obliviously. They faced each other, their divine auras clashing and thundering. Ads by PubFuture. Like you always do. Your utter contempt for me is so palpable. Alitsa seethed. I am no longer an angel crawling under your feet. He yelled. I am a god, just like you. His voice echoed through the air, burning the reality as hot as the surface of a star. The world around him and Akasis altered into an expanse of red fire and brilliant light. The madness in his iron-black eyes deepened as his heart thumped heavily against his chest, like a beast rattling the chains in an attempt to break them. Chain your madness, Alitsa Tutor. Akasis spoke in a low, deep tone. The ocean of light pierced through the crimson flames, illuminating the entire illusory world. The world faded away, revealing the unaffected Ontal Mountains. Alitsa heaved through his nose, like a wild beast freed from shackles. However, the madness in his surging eyes receded eventually. Why do you choose Trunsoest over me? He finally asked. November LBJNN. Akasis unexpectedly answered. You reminded me of my past self. Alitsa was taken aback. Akasis continued, shaking his head and looking at him indifferently. But even I knew when to stop. And you didn't. Alitsa silently looked at the sun god before turning back and leaving the Ontal mountain. However, he abruptly turned back, his hands clenched. This doesn't mean I'll be on your side in the coming war of gods, Akasis. Okay, Akasis stated, with a blank expression. Alitsa Tutor immediately left. He didn't dare to stay here any longer, as he was about to lose it again when he heard Akas's utter disregard in his voice. It was not the time to confront Akasis. But it won't be long before the right opportunity presents itself. At that time, he will extinguish the eternal sun in the high heavens and bring that sun bastard down from his fucking high horse. Chapter 124, Tudor Empire. On August 3, 1110, Alitsa Tutor declared his sovereignty over the province of Trier. The Tudor Empire was established, ruling over 1/4 northern continent. Alitsa Tutor ascended the royal throne that was rightfully his, forged by blood, victory, and madness. Under his scarlet crown, there were no cheers or jubilation, only fear and surrender were worthy of honoring him. He was hailed as the Blood Emperor. With his ascension, the 4 insurgent nations were completely subjugated by the Angel of Time's thunderous actions, who presented those lands as an offering to the Blood Crown. It resulted in the empire's territory expanding to nearly 1/3 of the northern continent in less than an hour. In his first act, Blood Emperor declared the Lord of Storms, God of Knowledge, and God of Steam to be heretic gods in his kingdom. Steam and machinery were banned, libraries were burned, and thunder became a bad omen. The madness pervaded the air, infecting the hearts of men and releasing the primal beast within them. It all ultimately resulted in sun devotees storming a small steam cathedral in Trier. And, in an unprecedented act of blasphemy, the divine statue of Artisan was dragged down from the high altar, rupturing into pieces as it landed on the ground. A picture was taken that perfectly captured the act. It spread the act of blasphemy like wildfire across the continent. Surprisingly, the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun did not intervene or try to prevent it from spreading. This event literally poured oil on top of an already raging fire, causing it to rage like a super volcano on the verge of erupting and consuming the world in ashes. The gears of time were turning, opening the curtains for a new era, an era filled with chaos and anarchy. The Palace of Eternity stood, illuminated by the dim silver glow of stars in the dark ocean of cosmos. Tension and fear pervaded the air throughout the royal palace and even the capital, which had lost much of its usual vibrancy during the night. Ads by PubFuture. Silence filled the city as people huddled in their beds, homes, and bunkers, crying out to whatever god they believed in for a peaceful night. They kept praying and sacrificing to the gods just so they could wake up in the morning and see the eternal sun. Saints wandering through the shadows, unseen and unheard, witnessed such scenes all over the city. Their nerves tensed whenever they noticed an anomaly in their perception, and they immediately reported it to the royal palace before going to check and neutralize it by force. There can be no room for error. Nothing can destabilize the remaining order. In the royal palace, Trunsoest stood in front of the silver table with Augustus and Castia, looking at the holographic projection of the northern continent that was projected from the devices attached to the silver table. They haven't left the royal palace since Alitsa Tutor's ascension, as they are dealing with the anarchy that has engulfed the collapsed empire. And the churches did nothing to help them, staying completely silent until the terrifying declaration of alliance. Trunsoest was sending instructions to his royal legion, Augustus was responding to reports from angels, saints, and demigods from around the collapsed empire, and Castia was organizing all the information from the projection of the continent, preparing a daily report on the situation of the entire northern continent. There was also an empty chair around the table adorned with white flowers and a photo of Trunsoest, Augustus, Castia, and Sauron standing together in the same central room, smiling, as their eyes were overflowing with joy and happiness. "Rest in peace, Sauron," was written in red ink above Sauron. The atmosphere in the central room of the palace was heavy and depressing as they went about their duties, desperately trying to keep what little was left. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew into the central room through the balcony, drawing their attention. They looked up to see a hooded old man carrying a white book enter the central room through the balcony. "God of wisdom and knowledge, leave us alone." The God of knowledge spoke as he looked at Augustus and Castia. "No-vel-be in .c ohm." Augustus and Castia complied. They only exchanged a glance with Trunsoest before bowing once to the god and exiting the central room. "Your excel," Trunsoest greeted, but paused as God of knowledge motioned for silence. God of knowledge pulled sacred emblems of other gods from his robe. He walked to the balcony, holding it all in his right hand. Ads by PubFuture. He finally spoke in a deep voice, his gaze fixed on the sacred emblems. "Attend everyone. I stand on the balcony of the Palace of Eternity and I hold your emblems. Solomon is about to resurrect tonight." Trunsoest looked up at the night sky, unsurprised by the news. With a shimmer, 6 divine figures appeared in the dark sky, descending on the balcony of the royal palace. After hearing the message from the God of knowledge and wisdom, the gods descended with their true bodies. The tension in the air was palpable as the god of steam glared at eternal blazing sun, who merely smiled back while waving his hands at the Lord of Machinery. Lord of Storms went to lean on a pillar, his scrutinizing eyes staying on the figure of eternal blazing sun. Earth Mother and the eternal blazing sun stood together, holding hands. God of Combat was nearby, his dazed and blurry gaze fixed on their holding hands. Meanwhile, Evernight Goddess walked over to Lord of Storms and stood silently beside him. "Now is not the time for us to be at odds," God of Knowledge asserted, staring at the gods. "We should put aside our differences and focus on Solomon's resurrection. Won't it just result in a convergence?" "So, what's with all this solemnity, Harabergen?" questioned Lord of Storms. "No," God of Knowledge replied, "if only things were as simple as you wish, Leodoro, I wouldn't have summoned all of you here. The situation we may be in is potentially disastrous." "Is it disorder?" God of Steam asked. "Disorder, it is," God of Knowledge nodded. "It is not necessary to be concerned about the convergence and resurrection. But, what follows after will be truly disastrous if we don't manage to stop it." "Get to the point, Harabergen," Lord of Storms said impatiently, his narrowed eyes, though, still fixed on eternal blazing sun, who was whispering something into Earth Mother's ears. "The resurrection of Solomon should take 4 steps. First, the uniqueness and characteristics converge on the palace where Solomon is resurrecting." God of Knowledge patiently explained. Ads by PubFuture. Because the Eternal Order is involved, even true gods cannot stop or interfere with this step. Second, the uniqueness and characteristics combine with resurrecting Solomon, causing him to immediately return to his former status as God. Third, the former subjects of Black Emperor hear the majestic voice of their fallen emperor proclaim his return. Fourth, the step that will bring disaster to the northern continent or, more importantly, to us. His twisted order will return with the resurrection of Solomon. There was only silence among the gods as they listened to God of Knowledge. Anarchy reigns over most of the northern continent, God of Knowledge continued. The addition of disorder will undoubtedly bring calamity to the world. This wouldn't have been a problem if the Golden Order hadn't been weakened, he sighed as he looked at the eternal blazing sun. When the twisted order returns, it will shroud most of the reality of the northern continent. We can't let that happen because it will affect all of our anchors. The Order of Solomon will see to it that it happens. God of Knowledge finished, closing his omniscient book. The gods remained silent for a brief moment before being broken by eternal blazing sun. The sun god smiled. There is a simple solution to this entire problem. He approached Trunsoest, grabbing his shoulders and dragging him to the center. The birth of Justiciar will suffice to deal with the twisted order brought about by Solomon's resurrection. He suddenly guffawed. This would be an excellent way to welcome Solomon back into the world. Ignoring his sarcastic remakes, God of Steam asked, "So, you want Trunsoest to become Justiciar right now?" "Yes." Eternal Blazing Sun nodded and looked over Trunsoest's shoulder at God of Knowledge. "Wasn't this also your plan, Harabergen?" "It is," God of Knowledge said, peering deeply at him. "Trunsoest has already devised his divine order. It would be no problem to begin the apotheosis ritual right away. However, he is still not an emperor." God of Combat frowned. "She can take care of this issue." Eternal Blazing Sun pointed at Earth Mother. "She is, after all, Earth Mother, with partial authority over the earth itself. It also includes the land on which we currently stand. So, her recognition of Trunsoest as emperor should suffice. This is also preferable than repeating the whole coronation ceremony again." Under the gaze of the gods, Earth Mother nodded in acknowledgement. The gods then fell silent in agreement. "Well," Eternal Blazing Sun smiled as he looked at Trunsoest, who was in a daze. "Let's get started." Chapter 125, Night Emperor. Palace of Eternity, Backland. The most powerful beings on the planet had gathered in the throne room with the Lord of Order, Trunsoest. The crimson moonlight filtered through the stained window behind the royal throne, illuminating Eternal Blazing Sun and Trunsoest, who were walking towards the throne together, followed by other gods. There were 7 other thrones adjacent, 3 on the right and 4 on the left of the royal throne. "Are you ready?" Eternal Blazing Sun inquired, his gaze fixed on Trunsoest. "Yes." Trunsoest nodded and exhaled deeply. "Even though this came out of nowhere. But, I am already prepared for the apotheosis ritual due to your previous instructions. I should be able to handle it." "No, I can handle it." Eternal Blazing Sun smiled. "That's the spirit. Now, tell me about your divine order." Trunsoest responded, his emotional eyes peered at the bronze throne. "My divine order is based on a principle that I devised. It is the principle of causality. Causality is the pull between meanings, it is connection that forms the relationship of all things." Eternal Blazing Sun raised his brows in surprise, but before he could speak, God of Knowledge interrupted, walking forward with them. "Causality, you say?" His starry eyes twinkled as he spoke. "That's a unique concept for a divine order." "Yes." Trunsoest nodded. "It is not only rare, but also extremely difficult to manifest." With a smile, Eternal Blazing Sun crossed his hands and listened in. "So, Trunsoest, what inspired you to create this principle?" God of Knowledge inquired, rubbing the omniscient eye on his book. "It was the Golden Order." Trunsoest answered, looking at the Eternal Blazing Sun. "The Sun God gave me access to it, and it was what truly inspired my principle." Ads by PubFuture. Harabergen. Eternal Blazing Sun intervened before God of Knowledge could ask Trunsoest any further questions. "Enough with the questions. He is already under a lot of pressure, and you aren't helping." Then he looked at the Trunsoest. "Now ascend to the throne. The ceremony will begin soon." Trunsoest nodded and walked towards the royal throne, while Eternal Blazing Sun and God of Knowledge stood back and observed him. "You are still so insidious, Occuses." God of Knowledge chuckled, rubbing his beard with his hand. "You're manipulating him so subtly to get what you want. And, as usual, you continue to exaggerate the facts. It's a bad habit, Harabergen, and it might come back to bite you one day. Eternal Blazing Sun smirked. About Trunsoest, I just pointed him out in the path and he was the one who made the journey himself. As tension filled the air, the god of knowledge and the eternal blazing sun exchanged glares, invisible sparks erupting from their confrontation of divine auras. The Evernight goddess stepped between them, her hands crossed. This isn't the time. Trunsoest's apotheosis is about to begin. So, please take your seats. In silence, the god of knowledge turned around and walked towards one of the thrones near the royal throne. At the sight of this, the eternal blazing sun chuckled and took his place on the throne as well. Let's begin, Evernight goddess declared, before nodding to the Earth Mother. Earth Mother arose from her throne, drawing everyone's attention. She approached Trunsoest, who had already ascended to his royal throne. I am ready, Trunsoest spoke up, his golden eyes twinkling like stars. I am ready. There is no pressure, Trunsoest. Earth Mother spoke in a soothing voice. You will ascend with the help of all of us. Trunsoest smiled as he nodded. Earth Mother went on, reassuringly placing her hand on his shoulder. Akasis is also here to help you, even if you have a problem with the order. Thank you. Trunsoest bowed his head. Thank you for. Earth Mother smiled. Now, save all of this for later. There will be plenty of time. All right, let's get started. Trunsoest finally said, taking a deep breath. Earth Mother raised her hands, and her palm began to glow with golden light, splattering on Trunsoest. The light then began to congregate above her palm, transforming it into a golden crown encrusted with diamonds. N-O-V-E in .c Ohm. Ads by PubFuture. She took the floating crown in her hands and looked at him. What shall your honorific title be, Trunsoest? Trunsoest answered, his firm eyes fixed on the crown. The Night Emperor. Eternal Blazing Sun snapped his fingers as he gazed up at the night sky. It is time for the world to wake up and witness the ascension of the Night Emperor. At 3 a.m., the warm amber sun awoke and emerged from the distant horizon, heralding the arrival of the day. The hue of a giant fluorescent orb ignited the dim sky and splashed the glittering, silver clouds in a multitude shades of gold as it hung low from the high heavens like a golden medallion. The sun's iridescent rays cast huge columns of light across the world, brilliantly illuminating every nook and cranny. The world awoke, as solemn and high music resounded from the Palace of Eternity, creating a grand symphony of melodies and signaling the new era. In the Palace of Eternity, Lilith stood under the light of the sun, holding the crown. She turned and faced the world ahead of her. I, Earth Mother, invoking divine authority, recognize Trunsoest, Lord of Order, as Emperor of the Trunsoest Empire. He will be the judge, restoring order to the fallen northern continent. And, he shall forevermore be known as the Night Emperor. The solemn voice of the goddess of life rang across the earth, striking into the hearts and souls of all people, regardless of origin or differences. The golden crown was then placed on Trunsoest's head by Earth Mother, crowning him as Emperor. The sun's rays glistened across the sky, revealing to the world the image of Trunsoest, the Night Emperor. God save the king! God save the king! That image drew the awakened citizens to a frenzied chant in recognition of their sovereign. Then, it faded away, as the rays of sun shimmered again. Ads by PubFuture. Eternal Blazing Sun stood up from his throne and walked towards the Trunsoest. He said, standing with Earth Mother. Now, Trunsoest, manifest your divine order and weave it into the fabric of reality. He raised his hand, causing the sunlight to converge in his hand, which continued to morph into the shape of a tree, ring, book, pendant, and so on. You can select a form for your order based on your preferences. I chose a tree for my golden order. Trunsoest stared intently at the ever-changing shapes in the hands of Eternal Blazing Sun. Then he nodded, as if he had finally made a decision. Then begin. Eternal Blazing Sun smiled, encouraging him. You are now the Emperor of an empire. An empire that is currently plagued by chaos. You will be the judge, establishing order and binding the beast of chaos, and ascending to become the Justicaire. Trunsoest began by closing his eyes and raising his hands, opening them wide and above. Eternal Blazing Sun and Earth Mother stood before him, while the gazes of the other gods were also on him. A golden light radiated from both of his palms, coursing from his very core. They began to ascend and converge directly above his head, slowly forming 4 golden circles intersecting with each other, while another golden light fell in the middle of the circles, connecting them all together. Image. A vast divine aura filled the hall as the entire reality around the Trunsoest began to glitch and shimmer at an astonishing rate. Suddenly, the god of knowledge rose from his throne, gazing at the astral world. Solomon's resurrection has also begun. The astral world. Crack. In the infinite space between Venus and Earth, an invisible tremor erupted as a massive black mausoleum descended on the very fabric of reality, cracking it. Boom. The black mausoleum shook heavily before collapsing on itself, bringing the surrounding reality with it, reducing it all into a black vortex of chaos. The vortex flared up like a black, ravenous tsunami, decimated the very reality in its path. It expanded and raged towards the center of the solar system. Its target is none other than the eternal sun. Chapter 126, Might of the Sun. Astral World. A dreadful aura filled the astral world within the barrier, stopping Venus and Mercury from continuing their orbit around the sun. Roar. A roar erupted from the swirling abyss of chaos, unleashing a shockwave that caused most of reality between Venus and Mercury to crack like a piece of fragile and brittle glass. It was as if a mad beast had finally broken the chains of order that had bound it for millennia, roaring and announcing its return flamboyantly for all to see. It was also in rage, which erupted from within its very core like a supervolcano. It flared its gargantuan tentacles of pure chaos, larger than many planets, towards the eternal sun in an attempt to completely destroy its captor. Image here. The perpetual light dimmed in Avalon, the divine kingdom of the eternal blazing sun, as a black crown and two characteristics of the Prince of Abolition ascended to the astral world under a mighty cosmic force. In Trier, Alitza Tudor stood silently on the balcony of a palace, looking at the Prince of Abolition. It flew out of his hand as a cosmic force shrouded it, ascending to the astral world. He looked up at the divided sky, half of it shrouded in chaotic darkness, the other half filled with pure beams of light emanating from the eternal sun in the high heavens. Ready the chariot. Without looking back, he said to Jacob, just in case. Jacob nodded and walked away from the balcony. Alitza Tudor then gazed towards Backland. Trunso est, he muttered under his breath. Ads by PubFuture. In the astral world, the uniqueness and characteristics appeared right above the swirling chaos. They fell into the abyss and vanished. Then, everything fell silent, eerie silence, and even the massive tentacles of chaos blazing towards the eternal sun froze in their tracks. Then, with a thunderous roar, a towering black throne erupted from within the swirl of chaos, shattering the silence. The throne was seated by a shadowy figure who faced the eternal sun. His eyes were filled with rage, madness, and even a little fear as he glared at the sun. However, the fear soon faded as rage and insanity completely occupied his dark eyes. He shook his hand and slammed into the armrest with all his might, shattering it. Obliterate the sun, he finally spat. The colossal tentacles swept back towards the sun, their size and power increasing as they blazed towards the eternal sun, destroying reality in the process. The eternal sun, the giver of light and life, emitted a scorching light that illuminated the entire space between Mercury, Venus, and Earth in an instant. A golden chariot with 4 white horses appeared out of the scorching sun. Eternal blazing sun rode in the sun chariot, the reins in his hands. His indifferent gaze was drawn to the colossal tentacles, then to the shadowy figure atop the abyss of chaos. He sneered and raised his hand in the space. The light that illuminated the astral world immediately converged above his palm, forming a light spear coursing with surging energy comparable to that of a real star. Eternal blazing sun hurled the light spear into the abyss of chaos. The light spear pulsated with infinite power before transforming into a streak of light and coursing towards the abyss of chaos. It finally collided with the tentacles of chaos and exploded, ejecting the energy of an entire star without restraint into the abyss of chaos and astral world within the barrier. Boom! A massive explosion of light appeared in the endless space between Venus and Mercury, sending out surging energy waves that could easily decimate planets in turn. Ads by PubFuture. The light splattered throughout the solar system, illuminating the corrupted planets beyond the barrier. It appeared as though another sun had risen in the solar system, dwarfing even the eternal sun. It was a battle for dominance, and with each clash, reality was shattered. While abyss of chaos tried to destroy it, the ocean of light purified it. Meanwhile, the powerful energy waves ejected by the explosion began to impact Venus, Mercury, and Earth. It was like veils large enough to make Earth look like a tiny ball and also throbbing with enough energy to tear planets down to their atoms. But, just then, the god of steam and machinery appeared in the Earth's atmosphere. He sighed exasperatedly before pulling a bronze scroll from his robes. He then threw it into the infinite space above. The bronze scroll was bathed in illusory light before transforming into an ethereal and colorless curtain adorned with esoteric symbols. The illusory curtain grew at an incredible rate, reaching 3 times the size of the earth before being split into 3 separate curtains. One fell downward and blanketed Earth, while the other 2 teleported to Venus and Mercury and completely shrouded them. The curtains shielded the planets from the terrifying destructive wave. They trembled frequently, but they eventually made it through the turbulence and protected the planets. The explosion subsided, the light faded, revealing a half-devastated abyss of chaos surrounded by numerous cracks in reality. The shadowy figure sat on the throne, seemingly unaffected by the previous clash. The eyes of shadowy figure were still filled with rage as he gazed at the sun god in his chariot. "Oh!" Eternal blazing sun raised his eyebrows in surprise. He sighed and shook his head. "It appears that 1 isn't enough." He suddenly grinned. "How about 10? 10 spears of light appeared around the golden chariot, each surging with the power of a real star. The sight of the 10 light spears seemed to startle the shadowy figure. "It seems it is still not enough." Looking at the shadowy figure, Eternal blazing sun continued. "So, let's make it 20. The light spear multiplied to 20. They emitted a brilliant light that illuminated the entire solar system. The reality around the spears was melting away, like a candle in a fire. Finally, the shadowy figure trembled in his throne, his rage fading, replaced by fear, primal fear. Ads by PubFuture. "Well," Eternal blazing sun chuckled. "That appears to be enough. Are you ready? Here it comes." He raised his hand as the light spears turned and aimed at the shadowy figure in unison. "Aucases!" A mighty voice thundered across the astral world. A phantom of a hanged man rose right before the swirling chaos. "Sasrir, the true creator. N-O-V-E in .c Om. Do you want war?" True Creator asked in a deep voice that echoed across the space, shaking it. His red eye was fixed on Eternal blazing sun in the sun chariot. Eternal blazing sun narrowed his gaze silently at the hanged man. He ultimately snorted and waved his hands at the light spears. The light spears dissipated into light particles as Eternal blazing sun left the battlefield, his chariot returning to Eternal sun, effectively ending the conflict. "Continue, Solomon," True Creator spoke, his gaze still fixed on the vanishing golden chariot. "And never, ever try these foolish acts again." Solomon's resurrection process continued under the protection of the True Creator. Palace of Eternity, Backland. Eternal blazing sun and Earth Mother still stood before Trunsoest, who was forging the ring. "The twisted order is about to descend on the world," he finally said, retracting his gaze from the astral world. The gods also turned their gaze away from the astral realm. Their expressions were heavy after peering at the phantom of the hanged man. A voice boomed from the sky, echoing across the material world. "My subjects, your Black Emperor has returned." Chapter 127, Justiciar. Palace of Eternity, Backland. "Your Black Emperor, my subjects, has returned." A voice from the sky rattled the royal palace. As he heard the Black Emperor's voice, Trunsoest frowned on the royal throne. It made him reflect on his past. He was born into a noble family that swore allegiance to the Black Emperor. His ancestors followed the Black Emperor and were the first to lay the groundwork for the empire. And he came to stand for order after witnessing the chaos in the waning era. It was a difficult time. Life had no worth. People fall like flies all over the world. The sight of all the chaos and madness of that fading era shook him to his core. He was nothing more than a child at the time, and children should never experience something horrifying like that. However, reality was not always fair. This experience altered his life forever. It made him long for light, for a utopia free of chaos and suffering, and, finally, for order. His ambitions and goals propelled him through life. It enabled him to outperform his kinsmen and eventually drew the attention of the Black Emperor himself. His Majesty appeared to have noticed his extraordinaires from others. The Emperor summoned him and, to his surprise, told him of his grand vision for a better future. He aspires to build an empire that unites the entire continent, thereby eradicating the chaos brought about by the cataclysm and restoring order to the world. Ads by PubFuture. Trunsoest believed him without a doubt, as his heart was already overjoyed at finally finding someone who shared his dream. He didn't even bother to think about it. Oh, how naive he was back then. Then he swore allegiance to Black Emperor in order for his dream to come true, at least in this way, and for him to be a part of it. In the end, his dream came true in its own way. Under the banner of the Black Emperor, the land was engulfed in peace and order. But it was completely different from what he had expected. This was not an orderly utopia. The Empire was nothing more than a new incarnation of chaos. His realization came too late. There was nothing he could do about it at the time. And His Majesty was already a god of the Black Emperor pathway. He was also an angel on His Majesty's path. So, any resistance in his heart was immediately extinguished by him. The difference between a god and an angel was so vast that an angel was nothing more than an ant to a god. He didn't give up hope, though. It was the only thing that kept him going during his darkest times. He clung desperately to hope, which was all he had left. He repeatedly tried to find a solution to the madness and chaos. Finally, the fates seemed to have taken mercy on him. His prayers and efforts were answered in the form of a silver-winged angel under the eternal blazing sun. The angel, known as the Angel of Miracles, showed a new path, a path filled with genuine hope for his dream. At the time, he made a choice. He took the angel's hands, and the rest was history. The memories flashed through his mind as he finally condensed his order into a golden ring. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Ads by PubFuture. The ring gleamed in the sunlight, revealing an engraving of his principle of causality on it. Here, a solemn voice drew his gaze away from the ring and to the side. The eternal blazing sun held out a potion filled with sizzling brass liquid. Wear the ring and drink it. So, Trunsoest, your order shall shroud the lands in between. Trunsoest took a deep breath and raised his hand, catching the golden ring floating above his head. He then wore it on his ring finger. Finally, he took the potion and drank it in one gulp without hesitation. A vast divine aura erupted from him, sending a wave that swept the northern continent in a fraction of a second. His perception spread across the continent. In his eyes, there were no more mysteries or secrets. It was all laid bare for him to see. Anarchy, war, sun, disorder. There is no order in this wretched world, he thought, raising his ring finger with a golden ring and pointing to the northern continent. The reality is his slate, his finger is the pen, his blood is the ink, and his ring is the source. Then I shall bring it into being. He began. With his movements of hand, the invisible rules were written into the fabric of reality. Everyone felt it, from all-powerful gods to helpless mortals. Every word, every letter, every sentence, and every law seemed to reverberate in their minds and souls. Just then, the disorder of Solomon descended on the world. It was like the serpent of chaos, Apophis, descended on the world in an attempt to return it to its primal state, chaos before creation. Trunsoest sensed the arrival of chaos as well. He didn't even look up, just moving his hands in the direction of the chaos. Ads by PubFuture. The invisible rules acted, transforming into golden chains of order and binding the serpent of chaos on the northern continent's shores, preventing it from spreading its calamity across the continent. Boom! The serpent of chaos thrashed in the chains, attempting to break them. It did succeed in breaking some chains, but for every chain it broke, 10 more chains appeared in its place, holding it in place. Meanwhile, he kept etching the laws into the fabric of reality. His fingers were frayed, as he continued to use his blood as ink. As he wrote, the laws were taking effort, judging the sources of chaos and anarchy in a thunderous manner. Trunsoest's hands were slowly but steadily bringing the order into being. His laws, however, were unable to extend their influence into the Tudor Empire as Alitza was obstructing him by temporarily controlling reality around the Tudor Empire. Trunsoest was unconcerned about Alitza and continued with his order. He also noticed the golden order in reality, but it was very weak and didn't stop his order from influencing reality. His laws were written directly into the deepest layer of reality. Even the eternal blazing sun couldn't tamper with his order. His empire was shrouded in order. There is no malice or favoritism. In his empire, the churches of the 7 gods and angel families are equally bound by the law. If anyone violates it, they will be directly confronted with an attack from him, a god's attack. His frayed finger made the final stoke a reality. The blood seeped into it, and the golden ring eventually faded. An invisible tremor erupted from his hand, shaking reality and sweeping his empire in an instant. His order was established. A balanced scale and a piece of white cloth appeared in front of him. He took the white cloth and wrapped it around his eyes. Then he caught the balanced scale in his hand and held it high. The balanced scale emitted a terrifying shimmer of light that illuminated the entire world, as everything and everyone below gods and kings of angels came to a halt for a brief moment. The very order of reality itself also became visible before dissipating. The birth of the Justiciar. Chapter 128, War. On August 4, 1110, the Night Emperor ascended to the throne, establishing the Trunsoest Empire. The Black Emperor was resurrected from the dead and re-established his fallen empire on the northern continent's borders. The Trunoest and Tudor empires controlled 5/6 of the northern continent, while the Solomon Empire controlled 1/6 of the continent. Another historic event occurred that afternoon. The Underworld Emperor declared war on the Trunsoest and Tudor empires, as well as the churches of the Evernight Goddess, God of Combat, and Eternal Blazing Sun. Immediately following that, the Black Emperor declared war on the Tudor and Trunsoest empires. The Black Emperor allied with the True Creator, who brought his followers to the Solomon Empire to support what little was left after the churches of the seven gods nearly destroyed his servants. The once proud and arrogant emperor was forced to bow before the True Creator and plead for assistance. The fallen Creator agreed, resuming their alliance. On August 5, 1110, the Blood Emperor ordered his angel families to join the war between the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun and the other three churches, declaring that he was defending his country from invasions by heretic churches. He also sent his Persian legions as support. The Jacob, Tamara and Ammon families joined the war, sending trained beyonders to aid the troops of the Eternal Blazing Sun. Meanwhile, the Night Emperor remained silent about the Orthodox churches' disputes, while secretly preparing his legion for the upcoming battle with the Solomon Empire and Biam Empire. The Underworld Emperor, on the other hand, had mobilized his entire undead army in preparation for a full invasion of the northern continent. The churches of Evernight Goddess and God of Combat finally broke their long silence by declaring war on the Biam Empire together. Due to the threat posed by death, they even managed to put aside their differences and band together under one banner. On August 6, 1110, the churches of Lord of Storms, God of Knowledge, God of Steam, Eternal Blazing Sun, and Earth Mother were still concentrating all of their troops for the upcoming legendary war. By 1 p.m., the aid from the Tudor Empire had arrived and joined the march with the churches of the Eternal Blazing Sun and Earth Mother. The total number of Beyonders surpassed 90,000, dwarfing the Three-Church Alliance. The Three-Church Alliance, on the other hand, received secret assistance from the Church of Evernight Goddess, which helped to balance the numbers on both sides. November LBJNN. The armies of both alliances are expected to clash the following morning in the Clyde Valley between Hornassus Mountains, beginning the War of Four Emperors. Ads by PubFuture. The light of dawn illuminated the land, signaling the end of the dreamy night. The smell of iron and blood, as well as the scorching heat of the blazing fire, awoke the world. The final march of two armies of Orthodox churches shook the entire continent. Image here. Every man and woman in both armies could feel the impending doom. When they were young, they were told that evil would be vanquished and that good would prevail. In innocence, they believed that good was enough. But no one ever told them this would hurt, that it would cost them their lives. That there'd be no going back. No one ever told them about the war, the beautiful calamity, the tragic victory, its tectonic plates and midnight brawls, laughter and lies and somersaults. It's a walk in the gardens of paradise, a lonely hikes down haunted highways. It's a chuckle through a sneer and bravery through tears. This is the war, this great epic, unceasing drama slowly unfolding before their eyes. The trumpets were finally blown. The armies arrived in the vast Clyde Valley, bringing their 7-day march to an end. The armies occupied the valley like an ocean, troop by troop, company by company, huddled together with little fear noticeable in all of their eyes. Image here. Then there was a deafening silence as the mighty armies of Orthodox churches confronted each other. The air was thick with tension, and the glare of sun was intensifying over the valley of death. The silence was suddenly broken. There was a long rolling of drums like thunder in the sky, followed by a braying of horns that shook the very Hornassus Mountains and stunned men's ears. And then, with a resounding rumble in the ground, the armies of three churches split in the middle, and out of it came the Angel of Calamity, Israel. He confidently rode alone on a black horse to the armies of churches of the Eternal Blazing Sun and Earth Mother. Ads by PubFuture. I speak for the Lord of Storms. His voice rang out across the valley, his black horse neighing in front of the armies of sun and earth. Does anyone here have authority to speak with me? He asked with scorn, his mocking gaze sweeping the sun and earth angels. Or, indeed, with wit to understand me. Mind thy tongue, barbarian. A beautiful woman with long green hair glared at the Angel of Calamity. Helena, Angel of Life, serving under the Earth Mother. Helena rode out on her silver horse, the bow drawn at Israel's heart. They strived at each other, but soon, Though Helena didn't release her bowstring, Israel quailed away and rode back as if menaced by the Angel of Life. All eyes turned to the Angel of Life in the valley, wide and curious. Then they realized. Helena's arrow radiated the divine aura of the Earth Mother. Helena's grip on the bowstring gradually loosened, causing the entire ground to tremble to its very foundations. I am the herald of the Lord of Storms, and may not be assailed. Israel cried out, noticing Helena. Where such ancient laws hold. Lucas Reyes, Angel of Light, spoke up, looking into the eyes of Israel. It's also custom for the herald to be less insolent. But no one has threatened you. You don't have to fear us until your errand is done. But, if you still insist on your foolish behavior. He exchanges glances with Helena. The threat was clear for all to see. He continued, so, state the terms, Angel of Calamity. Israel glared at them, enraged. Then he returned his attention to his armies. From his side, a woman in silver robes nodded at him. Her right eye flashed with an illusory divine light. Evelyn, Angel of Arcane, serving under the god of steam and machinery. Israel suddenly gained a lot of confidence. He smiled as he returned his attention to them. These are the terms. He eyed the angels one by one. The mob of the sun and its deluded allies shall withdraw at once beyond Trier, first unconditionally surrendering to the might of the storm. Second, Trier shall be the storms forevermore. Third, the west lands of Trier to the Andal Mountains shall be tributary to the steam. The terms were spoken loud and clear, for all to hear. Ads by PubFuture. A loud laughter suddenly sounded, piercing the heavy atmosphere in the valley. Blaze Larson, Angel of Miracles, spoke up, his eyes gazing up at the glaring sun. His voice thunders across the valley. Israel, the sun, has never bowed to anyone, even if that one was the Almighty Creator himself. He looked at Israel and spat mockingly. Unlike the storm, who bends to the whims of the night ever so often. So, take your terms and be gone. The Herald of Strom smiled no more. His face twisted with amazement and his eyes widened in rage. Blasphemer! Israel roared, drawing his lightning sword and charging at Blaze. His sudden attack was the last straw that broke the camel's back. The delicate balance was shattered. Charge! The roars erupted across the Clyde Valley. Blood splattered and fire flared up. The mighty armies clashed, blowing their war horns. The lightning cracked, the sun rose, illusory beams whizzed, sweat stung their eyes like tiny vipers, dripping down from their twisted faces. All around was a whirlwind of disorder and violence, a blur of color and vicious motion. The parched, panting tongues collected the dust-choked air which intermixed with the bitterness of iron. Blood pounded in their ears, drumming to a ferocious beat inside the helmet. The sound was barely loud enough to drown out the cries of men and women, the shattered white tower, and the thunder that struck the world tree. Above the lower scent of sweat was the smell of all-pervasive fear, carried aloft from clashing bodies that howled amidst a sea of scarlet liquid which drained from friend and foe alike, to soak a once vibrant field of white flowers. Image here. This was a glorious tragedy. A beautiful calamity. This was war. Chapter 129, Light and Darkness. September 7, 1110, Northern Continent, unknown location. Twilight shone through the stained windows of a massive silver tower, illuminating a large room filled with rows and rows of bookshelves. The walls were plastered with drawings of advanced technologies and structures far beyond the present era. A massive telescope was erected on a platform to the side of the room, and it extended out of the silver tower through an open dome. At the center of it all was a holographic projection of Earth made of pure information, uncovering the world's tales and stories for a woman to record and witness. The woman was dressed in a long blue gown with a purple crown on her head. She looked up at the projection of Earth, holding a purple book in her hand. She was none other than the Angel of Wisdom, Diana Knight. Her face creased at the sight of the volatile fluctuations erupting from the Clyde Valley, Northern Continent. It dwarfed any other fluctuations erupting from other parts of the world, capable of destroying a continent. It would have if not for the authority of the Night Emperor shrouding the battlefield, preventing the chaos of war from spreading. It's been a month since the war began. It is still going full throttle and shows no signs of slowing down. The fire and blood turned the valley into a war-torn hellscape. Diana raised her hand, pointing to the valley in world projection. Then she zoomed in, the projection expanded, the edges fading into obscurity, finally revealing a ruined valley. On the projection, she saw the war unfold in real time. The authority of order does, indeed, shroud the valley, but it does not prevent prying. So, she can gather information from the battlefield through her receiver and be instantly aware of the events of the war. Her purple eyes twinkled as she scanned the battlefield for Lucas. Ads by PubFuture. Her gaze was drawn to the sky, where a beam of consecrated light striking the weathered white tower, collapsing it. A sunbird soared out of the ensuing explosion of light, letting out a triumphant cry. Diana sighed, her tense shoulders sagging, as the victory cry rang in her ears. Thank the sun, he won, she thought, a wave of relief washing over her. Her gaze then narrowed as she tightened her grip on the purple book, concentrating on the armies of the three churches. Calm down, it won't help anyone, she told herself, her rage smothered. She can't leave her tower unless the situation becomes so dire that her presence in the war is required to turn the tides. Solitude is an important part of her upcoming apotheosis ritual. Still, the winds of war were not blowing in their favor. The Church of the Steam was introducing steam weapons into the war, completely destabilizing the conflict between low and mid-sequence beyonders. The hot weapons brought their troops to their knees, blasting them to smithereens. It was a total disaster for their side. However, not all was lost. For the majority of the month, the war between high-sequence beyonders was at a standstill. And to break the stalemate, the three-church alliance planned a collective siege, going all out against the Sun and Earth alliance. The Angel of Steam and Knowledge used the artifacts bestowed upon them by the gods to repel most angels from the Tudor Empire and Church of Earth Mother. Meanwhile, all the remaining angels of Storm and Knowledge besieged the Angel of the Sun with all their might in a frontal assault. It was a battle to the death. Diana was completely focused on the battle that began last night. She even temporarily paused her analysis and deduction involving world laws in order to focus on the battlefield situation. After all, they are her family. To say the war situation is dire would be an understatement. They were completely at a disadvantage from the start of the siege. 4 angels of the Sun versus 7 angels of the Storm and Knowledge. The odds were already stacked against them. By the end of the battle, Madeline Wright, Angel of Destiny, and Laius Wilson, Angel of Sun, were on their last breaths from the assault from Thunder and White Tower, and others was also not far better. Ads by PubFuture. Diana had made the decision to descend, regardless of the consequences. But she stopped herself when she saw Blaze perform a miracle using all of the wishes he had collected over 3 centuries. He performed a true miracle by wishing for their enemy's godhood to fade away. The miracle immediately changed the tides of the battlefield. Madeline and Laius were rescued by Earth Mother and Tudor Empire angels who escaped the hold and came to their aid. While this was going on, Blaze and Lucas slayed the angels who were besieging them and won the battle. Diana took a deep breath and waved her hand at the projection after checking on Lucas and finding no problems. It turned back into Earth. The battle may have ended in victory, but the war is far from over. It could go on for years, until the gods themselves arrive on the battlefield for the final battle of gods. The current battle in the Clyde Valley is merely a prelude for the main event. She finally concentrated on the purple book in her hand, pushing aside thoughts of the war of the gods. It was the hermit uniqueness. Her lord had already granted it to her after she had digested all of her knowledge emperor potions. And she had begun her preparations for the apotheosis ritual, which is to create a new law, and successfully integrate it with the world. Given the essence of her world, it was one of the most difficult apotheosis rituals. To it put into perspective, the world in her eyes is like a huge machine. The gods, authorities are the parts that keep it all together and prevent it from collapsing on itself. The power source for the machine is the sun, the hyperlink that connects the parts of machines represented by door. The information is represented by hermit. The heart of machine is paragon, the incarnation of problems or mistakes is error. The list goes on and on. As a knowledge emperor, this is how she truly sees the world. So, if she wants to become the hermit, she must let the machine accept her law. This is the most challenging part. Ads by PubFuture. The machine is far too complex and intricate in and of itself. As a result, it will immediately reject any laws that are even remotely incompatible with itself. So, it is nearly impossible to derive a law that is compatible with the machine. This, however, was not enough to deter her. The expectations and sacrifices on her path are too great for her to turn back now. This is also her lifelong dream. Diana finally sighed, feeling the weight on her shoulders. She walked towards the table at the far end of the room. She was returning to her work, analyzing and deriving global laws. She came to a halt and looked to her side. The fabric of reality began to shimmer as a flood of information rushed towards her. Diana raised her hand and accepted it with a somber expression. The fact that the information appeared in front of her, bypassing the restrictions and defenses of her tower, indicated that it involved the gods themselves. Her pupils dilated. Edward, it can't be. Diana dashed towards the window, her heart torn by searing pain. She gazed out the window at the sky. The setting sun in the twilight sky turned white, emitting a scorching glare that illuminated half of the entire sky. A crimson moon rose from the horizon like a scene from the apocalypse. The thick darkness erupted with the crimson moon, heading towards the pure light, heralding the arrival of night. The light and darkness shimmered in the sky, revealing the eternal blazing sun and the Evernight goddess, who charged at each other with their fabled sun spear and night scythe. No, Diana muttered incoherently, tears welling up in her eyes. However, before she could process it all, the light and darkness collided. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Boom! A blaze of illusory light erupted, flooding her vision and forcing her to close her eyes as tears streamed down her cheeks. Chapter 130, Death. 10 minutes earlier, Amantha Mountains, Northern Continent. Evernight Goddess, they call her. Her origins are unknown, as are her intentions. Her true name was lost in the fables of history, only to be remembered by the godly beings who stand with her above all. However, no one can deny her power. Her arrival had caused the heavens themselves to tremble. Her action, though rare, shook the illusory river of fate, sending impacting waves that alerted fates in untold numbers every time. She rules the night. She is mankind's first darkness. She is also moonrise and midnight. She is a primal being, more eternal than eternity itself. The darkness, on the other hand, was never without its own untold secrets. A terrifying legend, fabled from the truth, told of a woman who was strikingly similar to the night, walking out of the mountains of corpses holding a dark Styx drenched in the blood of her own kinsman, her lips adorning a gentle smile throughout the act. It was as though she was carrying out an act of kindness rather than vengeance. The woman went on to be known as the bane of demonic wolves, the true empress of horror who conquered the darkness is her own crown. The night goes by many titles and names, but at the end of times, she will always remain as a survivor from the forgotten times. N-O-V-E-J-N.C ohm. 4. She was Ammonizes, the ruler of tenebrous heaven, the obscure realm of eternal darkness. Her realm was always shrouded in darkness, hidden from all eyes, mortal or divine. It was the final resting place for all who believed in her, where they found eternal peace in her arms. It had always been perpetually dark since its creation, as the sun had never graced the dark lands of tenebrous heaven. But the eternal night has come to an end, as the concealment of kingdom was torn by the mighty hands of a god. A white sun invaded and emerged from the dark horizon, signifying the wrath of the eternal blazing sun. The white sun emitted blinding beams of light that smote down on the darkness, shattering it in the most viscous way. The divine kingdom was filled with brilliant light, collapsing and purging it all in an ocean of light. The entire tenebrous heaven began to crumble into void under the assault of the sun. Ads by PubFuture. The dark mountains, palaces, and even the crimson moon began collapsing in order with the crumbling divine kingdom. It was all coming to an end under the wrath of the eternal sun. But just then, Ammonizes emerged from the ruins of the dark caste, unaffected by the beams of light. She looked indifferently at the rising eternal sun and the chaos it had wrought in her kingdom in a fraction of a second. She then waved her hand. A flood of darkness erupted from her. It was akin to a dark beast of judgment, reaching the bright sky and swallowing the eternal sun, extinguishing every ounce of light within the crumbling divine kingdom. Ammonizes then swept her gaze over the ruins, causing it all to fade into eternal darkness, leaving only her floating in the eternal void. She raised her hand and reached into the dark ocean above her to retrieve her night scythe. Her form transformed with a shimmer. Her torso and waist grew a pair of massive arms covered in dark hair. A crimson moon and an invisible fog also descended into her massive arms from the void. She held it all together, gazing ahead into the darkness, piercing into the outside world, to the eternal sun in the sky. Aucases, she spoke, her voice low, almost a whisper. The darkness grew thicker around her, surging and thrashing against itself in a frantic manner. Present. The sun and moon rose from the horizons, heading for each other with all their might, sounding the symphony of calamity across the sky and earth. The gods, who had been focusing their gazes on the battle in Clyde Valley, were taken aback by the sudden celestial phenomenon. The war came to a halt as the Beyonders gazed at the sun and moon in the sky, their eyes gradually filling with hopelessness and despair. It was a cataclysmic sight. The sun's scorching rays and the crimson moon's ethereal light were unleashed on the world with no restraint. It was charging towards them with the intent of wreaking total carnage. Ads by PubFuture. Regardless of their sequences, they felt so insignificant in the face of the coming cataclysmic force. Many dropped their weapons and knelt on the ground, laughing and crying as they spread their arms at the sun and moon veils. Lucas, Blaze, Laius, and Madeline stood together in the ruined ground, their armor tattered and their swords rusted. What just happened? Laius wondered aloud, his face illuminated by the sun. Something terrible for sure, Lucas replied, his voice low and his gaze fixed on the crimson moon. The sun? Madeline asked, her voice quivering. Laius turned to face the white sun with her. The scorching rays of the sun were like veils covering the sky and descending on them. They were too small, almost a speck of dust in comparison to the size of veil. The sun never harms his own. Blaze reassured them. They looked at the sky, as the sun and moon were closing in on each other ever so close. In the sky, eternal blazing sun and Evernight goddess charged at each other with their fabled sun spear and night scythe. The sun and moon, the light and the darkness, the day and night, these primordial forces were at odds, bending to the will of their rulers. Boom, they finally collided in the sky, causing an illusory light to erupt, illuminating the majority of the world. The light vanished as quickly as it appeared, with no visible damage anywhere in the world. The sun and moon were still adorning the sky, only inches apart. It looked as though a mighty force intervened and stopped the collision of the celestial bodies. In the silver tower, Diana opened her teary eyes, gazing at the situation in the sky. "Stop this madness," Earth Mother yelled, standing between Evernight goddess and eternal blazing sun. Her glowing hands rose up at them, holding them down with the might of the entire earth. Evernight goddess finally put her scythe away and floated high in the sky, gazing at the eternal blazing sun. Ads by PubFuture. Eternal blazing sun, on the other hand, waved his spear, breaking the earthly authority that had bound him. He then lunged at the goddess of the night, his spear aimed at her heart. Evernight goddess stood there with her hand folded against her chest, indifferent. "Stop, Occuses," Earth Mother embraced the sun god from behind, halting his attack. Eternal blazing sun appeared to have finally calmed down. Even so, he continued to point his spear at the Evernight goddess. "I assumed you, for one, would understand the significance of relationships and promises. Yet, how terribly wrong I was," he seethed. "You're just a cold-hearted bitch who cares about nothing but your own pathetic excuse of self." Evernight goddess continued to stare at him indifferently, seemingly unfazed by his insults. Earth Mother, on the other hand, looked at her love with wide, sluggish eyes. "Mark my words, bitch," Eternal blazing sun spat, "I'll make sure you feel every ounce of the pain he felt in his final moments. Then I will throw you to Antigonus. I will see to it that he feasts on you to the last of your bits." He took Earth Mother's hands in his, their figures glinting in the light and fading away from the sky. Eternal blazing sun finally looked Evernight goddess in the eyes. "I should never have trusted you." His low voice lingered in the air as he and Earth Mother vanished in a light flash. For a few moments, Evernight goddess floated in the air, her indifferent gaze fixed on the fading light. Then she, too, vanished from the sky in a flash of moonlight. Diana finally averted her gaze from the sky, wiping away her tears. Edward had died. The blessing he received from the Evernight goddess was abruptly withdrawn by her, causing his situation to deteriorate beyond any hope of recovery. Her lord was ultimately forced to slay Edward himself, as all hope had been lost. She moved towards the table at the far end of the room, which held a blue sword. Diana wielded the handle with great force. Her outfit changed on its own, revealing a black fit armor stained with blood splashes. Then she dashed towards the tower's exit, her face emotionless, her eyes dull. Her figure broke into a flurry of information, surging towards Hornassus Mountain like a tsunami, leaving death and destruction in her wake.